I like romance just as much as the next person, but at some point in February, I always inevitably end up getting tired of reading it. And if you guys do too, here's a list of books coming out next month that have little to no romance. I have these books organized by genre, and they're in no particular order, except that each genre will have one book that is my most anticipated release. All of these books are books that I've found myself. I did all of the research myself, so I'm not really trying to sell you on anything. I'm just talking about the books that I think are interesting, and if by chance you find them interesting as well, then you can also save them and read them at some point. And if we read the same ones, maybe we can discuss them together. So let's begin with fantasy. The first fantasy that I have is a book that I thought sounded like absolutely insane. It's The Fox Hunt by Caitlin Breeze. We're following this girl who's a second-year student at this prestigious England university. She ends up winning this research fellowship and in the process becomes involved in the university's elite. She meets this guy, Jasper Balfour. He is an aristocrat, he's part of this university elite, and he's also the leader of this all-male secret society called the Turnbull Club. Now you're probably thinking, wait, this is sounding like a romance. This is the part of the synopsis that gets absolutely insane. One night, the Turnbulls propose a sinister little game, a fox hunt. The women run, and the men chase. And Emma finds herself fleeing for her life through the streets, hunted by the boy she loves. Torn from her ordinary life and trapped in a dangerous otherworldly realm, Emma awakens transformed. No longer mortal, she's become something beastly. And now she must summon every ounce of cunning and ferocity to save herself. Doesn't that sound insane? It sounds like it almost should be a romance, but then it turns into this like thriller situation, and I just thought that was really interesting. It's described as a dark academia, but I don't really see any element besides a setting that is like dark academia vibes. I still think the premise sounds like absolutely batshit crazy, and I think that's why I was so drawn to it. The next fantasy is The Apple and the Pearl by roamnce. The story is about this traveling ballet troupe. Everyone from the principal ballerina to the first violinist, from the wardrobe mistress to the newest members of the corps de ballet, have committed their lives to the perfection of the show. But every night they must also confront the malevolent glamour of their audience of fey creatures, only too eager to snatch them away into the other world. What does that mean? Do the members get snatched if they mess up? Like, what is going on? The synopsis got me a little bit, and it didn't get me curious. Then we have two sort of mythology retellings. The first one is technically not a mythology. It is a retelling of Cleopatra by Sarah L. Arifi. I've always found Cleopatra fascinating. I'm a huge sucker for mythology retellings specifically, but obviously Cleopatra is not a mythology retelling. She was a real figure in history. The synopsis doesn't tell us much. Obviously, it will probably involve some romance, but I'm hoping that the story is going to be primarily focused on her life and her journey as a leader and a queen, more so than like the romantic parts of her life. I am excited about this one, but I am more excited about the next one. It is a Greek mythology retelling about the story of Dido. It's called The Wandering Queen by Claire Haywood. Alyssa, who is later known as Dido, her father dies, and his last decree is that his kingdom be split between Alyssa and her brother Pygmalion. But then Alyssa is sidelined by a group of powerful merchants who want Pygmalion to be the ruler instead of her because Pygmalion is easier to control and manipulate. So she ends up cast out of her home and she has to forge her own path. She goes on this epic journey and in the process becomes this strong and formidable leader. She ends up finding a new city to call her home. Then one day this man, Aeneas, appears at her city gates. He's fleeing the Trojan War. She shelters him and they fall in love. But she ends up having to make this impossible choice between her power and her love. But like I said, I am just like a huge sucker for mythology retellings, especially Greek mythology retellings. So I am looking forward to this one. And then the last fantasy that I have on this list is also the one that I'm the most excited about. It's called A Forest Darkly by A.G. Slatter. It's not part of a series, but it is part of a universe that the author has written books for previously. We are following this witch, Mayrob, who lives in the forest and she lives alone. She lives a very isolated life. A young woman appears at her doorstep and she is fleeing these godhounds that are trying to hunt down anyone who practices magic. Mayrob decides to protect this girl. She takes her under her wing and she teaches her how to control her magic. In the local village, children start disappearing, and if they do reappear, here, they come back as something different. As the villagers turn hostile and the godhounds close in, Mehrab finds herself at the center of a struggle to save the soul of the forest, the life of an old love, and her own new-formed family. The synopsis of this book made me think of this Switch game that I used to play called Witchwood, and I think that made me want to read this book even more. Maybe I could read this book in tandem with the game. That would be interesting. For science fiction, I only have 2 books, and I feel like I am equally excited about both. I couldn't choose a single book for the science fiction category, but both of these I would describe as like soft science fiction. I feel like they're more approachable than some like very serious science fiction. So first we have The Forest on the Edge of Time by Jasmine Kirkbride. The 2 characters we're following are Echo and Hazel, and they have both been recruited by this organization called Project Kairos, whose mission is to change the world and save it from ecological disaster. Echo is transported to ancient Greece, where she becomes a healer's assistant, and Hazel is sent to what sounds like the future. She is the last human alive, in a laboratory on a polluted island with nothing but tiny robots and an untrustworthy AI for company. But they both have no memory of their pasts, who they were, and when they go to sleep, they transcend time and meet each other in their dreams, but soon find out that knowing their past is detrimental to humanity's survival. As we've already established, I am a huge Greek mythology, Greek history fan, so the setting for Echo in this story is very appealing to me, especially because the synopsis mentions the politics and philosophy of that time period. This book does kind of remind me of This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is not a book that I've read yet, but the synopsis from both of these books sound pretty similar. The only difference is that in This Is How You Lose a Time War, it's 2 rival agents, so they're kind of like enemies. But in this book, it seems like it's just 2 women that seemingly have no connection to each other. The second science fiction is The Found Object Society by Michelle Merrick. And this one kind of reminds me of The Midnight Library, but it is a little bit different. We're following Greta Davenport, who has been living with the guilt of her parents' deaths for 20 years. For the last 20 years, she has tested the limits of her mortality, but nothing she does really gives her that dopamine rush that she's craving. Not until the night that she drunkenly crashes her car into a tree and receives an invitation to this Found Object Society. What she finds there are aisles and aisles of objects from different eras and different regions of the world, and each object allows you to relive the final moments of the person who died holding that object. Greta finally finds that high that she's been craving, but it doesn't stop her from kind of questioning who is behind the society and what their motivations are. A fever dream of a novel with episodic, time-traveling chapters told from multiple points of view, Found Object Society examines the depraved whims of the ultra-rich and the breadth of unresolved trauma, all while asking how grief and the choices we make in its aftermath can change the course of our lives. The idea of being able to relive someone's last moments in life, I just feel like the premise is really fascinating. I have 4 mysteries. Some of them do have some like thriller elements to them, but they are primarily mysteries. First, we have The Final Problem by Arturo Perez Reverte. This is a locked room mystery set in 1960. We're following this group of strangers that are stranded on a Greek island. They're all guests of the local hotel, but then Edith Mander, a British tourist, is found dead in the beach cabana. And the other guests on this island decide that the best person that they can find to figure out this murder mystery is this retired actor, Ormond Basil, who used to play the most celebrated television detective of all time. This book just sounded kind of funny because they really have like no other option. They don't have anyone else who can try to solve this murder mystery. This guy who played a detective on television is asked to be the investigator of this murder mystery, and that just sounded kind of interesting to me. Then we have The Ghost Women by Jennifer Murphy. This is another murder mystery set in 1972 this time, and each one of the bodies is arranged in the same position as the tarot card that is found at the crime scene. The Art Institute used to be a monastery that housed a secret order of monks that carried out witch trials and executions because in these stories, obviously, the building can never just be a building. The detective assigned to the case, Lola Germany, believes that the murders are ritualistic, which, yeah, that's pretty obvious. I like the tie-in to tarot cards. Like, for example, the first student that they find is hanged from a tree, like the hangman. I've always been fascinated by witches and the witch trials, especially fictional stories where the women were actually witches. Also, we don't know if there's some kind of supernatural element to this, or if there's just a crazy serial killer running around and killing students. The next mystery is The Fall of Iris Henley by Jennifer Graham. This is a YA mystery this time, so young adult. Iris Henley's life is destroyed when someone anonymously posts on her school's subreddit thread that she is the one who murdered her boyfriend and her best friend the previous summer. And she ends up losing everything because of that accusation. She loses her friends, she loses her college prospects, and she loses her freedom because the police start investigating. It turns out that her boyfriend Rocky had been cheating on her with her best friend Lynette. So Iris she ends up looking like the perfect suspect. But she didn't do it, and to prevent her whole life from getting ruined, she has to figure out who did. And then the last and final mystery on this list, the one that I'm the most excited about, it is The Midnight Taxi by Yosha Gunasekera. We're following our main character Siri. She is 28, she's still living with her parents, she's a taxi cab driver in New York City, and she's really struggling to make ends meet. She makes a connection with one of her customers, a public defender. They bond over their shared Sri Lankan roots. Siri starts to feel like things are starting to look up for her with this new friendship. But then Siri's next customer is murdered in the backseat of her cab. And it's as if she's been dropped into one of the true crime podcast episodes that she's always listening to. She's pinned as the obvious and the only suspect, and she ends up having to reach out to that friend that she made, the public defender, Amaya Fernando. She has to figure out how to clear her name before it's too late and her whole life is ruined. I feel like I was drawn to this book because it's kind of interesting. The person is murdered in the backseat of her cab. How do you get away with that, you know? Like, did she leave the cab for a second and someone ran in and murdered her customer and then ran out? Like, I want to know how someone could get away with a murder like that. Okay, next we have horror, and I have two horror here. There is one that I am more excited about than the other. First, we have The Darkness Greeted Her by Christina Furco. This is a psychological horror, and it is also young adult. And the synopsis also says that it's a sapphic story, but nowhere else in the synopsis do you get that impression. I'm not sure where that comes into play in the story. Our main character, Penny, still hears the voices of her dead father, and the voices are telling her to hurt the people around her. So she can't go to school, she can't be around her friends, and she also suffers from OCD. So she decides to sign up for this exclusive mental health retreat in the woods. That always ends well. But everything seems good at first. She is surrounded by girls that are going through similar things that she is. She's bonding with them. And she no longer feels alone. But then she starts hallucinating. She starts seeing this figure looming over her bed that she calls the Shadow Man. And she begins to think that she's losing her mind. But then other girls at this camp start going missing. It becomes clear that whatever is happening is not just in her head. As the hallucinations become increasingly intense and more girls wind up dead, Penny must work with whoever is left standing to figure out what is real before the Shadow Man uses their traumas against them and claims their lives. I feel like it's the combination of the woods and this Shadow Man and her not knowing if it's all in her head or if she is actually seeing these things that just sounded really intriguing to me. I feel like as far as horror goes, I am always more drawn to like psychological horror. It just sounded really creepy. And then the second horror, and the one that I am the most excited about, is called Maria the Wanted by V. Castro. This is a vampire horror / thriller. Maria is a wanted woman. She's wanted by an Aztec trafficker, a cartel boss, the people she fights for, and now the devil she can't resist. Her journey begins as a would-be immigrant turned vampire in Juarez, Mexico, until the injustices of the world turn her into something else. She's traveling around Mexico. She ends up becoming an enforcer of justice for this community that embraces her, most likely because they don't know she's a vampire. They think she's some kind of saint or like a god. And then a violent encounter with a vampire boss ends up leading her to her creator. She gets tangled up in this ancient vampire underworld. I feel like this sounded really intriguing to me because it has been a hot minute since I have read a vampire novel that was not romance, primarily. The fact that we are seeing vampires coming back into horror is like truly so exciting to me because for a very long time, vampires in the media have been highly romanticized. It'll just be fun to go back to that world where vampires are they are creatures of the night, you know? They are blood-sucking fiends. At least that's what I'm hoping this book is going to be. It's going to be refreshing to see vampires as the creatures that they are supposed to be, rather than the hot teenager at the high school. And then the last genre that we have is literary fiction. So I have 4 literary fictions. Interestingly, 3 of them are written by Asian authors, which I feel like I've been seeing a lot of Asian authors in like the new releases in 2026. So that is pretty exciting. The first one we have is Bad Asians by Lillian Lee. We're following 4 friends, Diana, Justin, Errol, and Vivian. They're part of the Chinese American community, and they've always done what their community expects them to do. They always got good grades, they went to great colleges, and they're graduating, but they graduate into the recession of 2008. Instead of beginning their new careers, they are back to living at home and they're unemployed. And then Grace, who is also part of their community, she asks them if she can make a documentary about them, and they say yes, because they don't expect anyone to ever watch it. She makes a documentary and she posts it online on this up-and-coming new media platform, and it goes viral. 2 million people end up seeing it, and it flings them off course from the life that they were hoping to live. Bad Asians is both an exploration of Asian American identity and a portrait of a generation shaped by the rise of the internet and the end of the American dream. It's an epic tale of friendship and coming of age. Bad Asians asks, what if the same people who made you who you are end up keeping you from who you're meant to be? The next literary fiction is Every Happiness by Reena Shah. The story follows Deepa and Ruchi, who meet for the first time at their Catholic school in India when they're 12. They become friends really quickly, and they stay that way into adulthood. But as they grow up, the limits of their friendship are tested. Deepa marries a doctor and moves to Connecticut, and Ruchi finds an engineer that is headed for the same state and follows her friend. They have their own families and begin to feel the struggle of raising their own children. Eventually, Ruchi discovers a very dangerous secret about Deepa's husband's wealth. Both women are forced to weigh the tangled bonds of their friendship with their lives and their families in the burgeoning Indian American community. Next is Everyday Movement by Gigi L. Leong. The story is following 2 college roommates, Ali and Panda. They were both involved in a protest against this national security law that would effectively spell the end of democracy for people living in Hong Kong. We're following them not only as they are dealing with the anxiety of this social unrest, but also as they're navigating their regular everyday lives in the process. Everyday Movement reveals existential questions that interrupt normal belonging, patriotism, the meaningfulness of an electoral democracy, as well as the pampering sense of norm created by consumerism. I feel like this book, it sounded interesting to me just because I feel like it's going to be very relevant to today in the US, as well as probably other countries right now. The question of, is our democracy being threatened? And also, what role does consumerism play in our politics today? I feel like there's a lot that we can probably learn from this book, and a lot that's relevant to our society today. The last literary fiction that I have, which is also the one that I am the most excited about, The Silent Period by Francesca Manfredi. We're following Christina Martino, who one night decides that she's going to delete all of her social media. And then that escalates to her deciding to no longer speak. For a while, she only communicates through writing, but eventually that stops as well. And then she just disappears altogether. Her sister Elena is desperately trying to find her. She's terrified. And in the process, she discovers a world that's much quieter and stranger than she could have ever imagined. Blending sparse prose, bilious wit, and unexpected tenderness, Manfredi probes at the condition of solitude, whether chosen or suffered, salvic or fatal, and the ineffability of existence. I mean, I was drawn to this book again because I feel like it is very relevant to our society today, and people are kind of trying to separate themselves from social media, deleting their profiles, deleting their accounts, and I'm just curious to see what this book has to say about this sort of anti-social media mentality that is popping up. So those are all the books that I am excited about that are coming out in February that have little to no romance. I mean, some of them have a little bit of romance, but for the most part, they are stories about other things, and the romance is kind of just a subplot if it is in the story at all. I don't expect to be able to get to all of these books, obviously. I just like seeing what is going to be published. A lot of these books I feel like don't get talked about that much. Like, these are not books that are getting marketed as much as some of the other ones that are releasing in 2026. So I just thought it could be interesting to see what other books are out there, expand our horizons, explore more stories, more perspectives, and maybe get some recommendations that are not the highly publicized, marketed books. If you enjoy hearing about new releases, then make sure to follow me because I will probably continue to do this every month. If any of these books interested you guys, please let me know in the comments or let me know what new release you guys are really excited to read. Maybe I'll pick it up as well. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.